A young actor looked John Wayne dead in the eye and said, "Maybe if you actually understood acting, you'd know why I can't just perform on command like some trained monkey." What Duke did next in front of 85 crew members didn't just end a career. It broke a man's spirit so completely that he never stepped on another film set again. It was August of 1969 on the set of True Grit's follow-up production in the scorching Sonoran Desert outside Tucson, Arizona. The temperature hit 104 degrees by noon. Rattlesnakes hid in the shade of every rock. Duke was coming off his only Academy Award win, finally recognized after 4 decades of being Hollywood's hardest-working star. This new Western was his passion project. He'd invested his own money, handpicked every crew member, and spent months preparing every detail. Duke's reputation wasn't built on talent alone. It was built on something rarer in Hollywood: respect. Respect for the crew who built the sets at dawn. Respect for the stuntmen who risked their necks for his action scenes. Respect for the script girls, camera operators, makeup artists, and horse wranglers who made movie magic possible. In 40 years of making pictures, Duke had never once kept a crew waiting. He knew every person's name. He ate lunch with the grips, not the executives. When Duke Wayne said he'd be on set at 5 a.m., he was there at 4:45, in full costume, lines memorized, ready to work. Then the studio sent him a 26-year-old actor fresh off a celebrated New York stage run. Someone will call Michael Landry. What happened over the next 6 days would become the most talked-about firing in Hollywood history. And those 5 words Duke spoke would echo through film sets for the next 50 years as a warning: talent without character is nothing. If you want to see how quickly arrogance destroys opportunity, keep watching. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Let's see how far this lesson travels. Michael Landry arrived in Hollywood with every advantage a young actor could want. He just finished a 6-month run in an intense off-Broadway drama where critics called him the next Marlon Brando. He trained under legendary acting coach Stella Adler. His jawline belonged on movie posters. His agent had convinced Paramount executives that Landry was the fresh face westerns needed to stay relevant as the 1960s became the 1970s. Duke's longtime casting director, a woman named Dorothy Spencer who'd worked with him since Stagecoach in 1939, sat in Duke's trailer with concerns written all over her face. "He's talented, Duke," Dorothy said carefully. "Maybe the most naturally gifted young actor I've seen in 10 years. But there's something else there. An entitlement. Like the world should stop and wait for his genius to arrive." Duke crushed out his cigarette. How bad? He kept his screen test crew waiting for 2 hours. When he finally showed up, he didn't apologize. He said, and I quote, "Real actors don't watch clocks. We watch human souls." Duke was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the desert. He'd given chances to hundreds of young actors over the decades. Some learned. Some didn't. But he always believed in giving people rope. Either they'd use it to climb, or they'd use it to hang themselves. "Give him the part," Duke finally said. "But make sure he understands something. This isn't a Broadway stage where 200 people sit politely in the dark. This is a film set where 85 people wake up before sunrise to build something together. He respects that, or he's gone." Landry signed his contract, flew to Tucson, and walked into the production meeting wearing designer sunglasses and a silk scarf despite the desert heat. While Duke laid out the shooting schedule, 5 a.m. call times, efficient takes, professional conduct, Landry leaned back in his chair with a slight smirk, as if humoring an old man telling stories about the way things used to be. Duke noticed. He noticed everything. But he said nothing. Not yet. The collision was coming. Everyone could feel it. The question wasn't if, but when. Day 1 of principal photography started the way Duke's productions always started. Before dawn, organized chaos turning into precision, every department ready before the sun touched the horizon. The first scene was straightforward. Landry's character, a young gunslinger learning from Duke's weathered marshal, had to ride hard across a mesa, dismount, and deliver 4 lines about justice and revenge. Simple. Clean. The kind of scene Duke had shot 1,000 times. They needed to capture it in the golden morning light, which meant a 90-minute window before the sun climbed too high and washed out the shot. By 5:15 a.m., 85 crew members were in position. 3 cameras ready. Horses saddled and calm. Duke sat on his mount in full costume, reviewing the setup with his cinematographer. The desert morning was perfect, cool, still, the light just beginning to paint the rocks gold. Landry's trailer door stayed closed. 5:30 a.m. Still closed. 5:45 a.m. The assistant director knocked. No answer. 6 a.m. Harder knocking. Nothing. The crew started shifting weight from foot to foot. Checking watches. Trading glances. Duke sat on his horse, stone-faced, but his jaw muscles were working. That was the tell. When Duke's jaw tightened like that, everyone who'd worked with him knew he was counting to 10 in his head, giving someone one last chance before the hammer fell. At 6:15, Landry finally emerged, hair perfect, wearing a bathrobe over his costume, holding a cup of herbal tea. "I'm visualizing the character's emotional journey," Landry announced to the assistant director, not apologizing, but explaining, as if he were doing everyone a favor. "You can't rush the internal process. Method acting requires deep preparation. Brando taught us that superficial performances come from superficial preparation." The assistant director, a patient man who'd worked with Duke for 15 years, kept his voice level. "We're losing the light. We've got maybe 40 minutes left in the window we scheduled this scene for." Landry shrugged. "Then maybe we should schedule for when the art is ready, not when some clock says it's convenient." Duke dismounted. Slowly. He walked over to Landry, 6'4" of quiet authority in dusty cowboy boots. "Son," Duke said, voice low and measured, "get on your horse." Something in Duke's tone made Landry swallow his next prepared speech about artistic integrity. He got on the horse. They got the scene in 2 takes. Landry hit his marks. Said his lines. But the damage was done. Duke had given him rope. And Landry was starting to braid it into a noose. What happened 3 days later would test Duke's legendary patience to its absolute limit. And if you've ever had to deal with someone who confused arrogance with excellence, you know exactly where this is headed. Drop a like if you're still with me, and comment your city. I want to see how far this story reaches. Day 4 brought the scene that mattered most to Duke personally. A 5-page dialogue between his martial character and Landry's gunslinger about what it means to be a man in a dying West. Duke had written these pages himself, late at night in his trailer, pouring decades of his own philosophy into the words. This wasn't just dialogue. This was Duke's legacy on paper. The scene required both actors to be razor-sharp. Complex blocking. Overlapping dialogue. Emotional beats that had to land perfectly. Duke had been rehearsing alone since 3 a.m., walking through every moment until it lived in his bones. The call time was 5 a.m. Critical lighting. They'd brought in extra equipment. The entire crew understood this wasn't just another scene, this was the heart of Duke's film. Duke was ready at 4:45. In position at 5 o'clock. Lines perfect. Landry's trailer stayed dark until 6:30. When he finally emerged, he didn't have his sides. Hadn't reviewed the blocking. When the assistant director handed him the script pages, Landry waved them away. "I don't memorize lines," Landry said, loud enough that nearby crew members heard. "I internalize intentions. The words come naturally when you're truly in the moment." Duke said nothing. Just nodded to the assistant director. They try a rehearsal. First rehearsal, Landry fumbled the dialogue, mixing up his character's lines with Duke's. Second rehearsal, Landry stopped mid-scene. "This dialogue feels stiff. Unnatural. Real people don't talk like this." Duke's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "These are the locked pages. They've been approved for 3 months. The words are the words." "But that's the problem with old Hollywood," Landry said, and the crew froze because nobody talked to Duke this way. "You treat scripts like they're carved in stone. Real acting means finding truth in the moment, not reciting memorized." "Let's break for lunch," Duke interrupted quietly. "Be back in an hour. With your lines learned." What happened during that lunch break would seal Landry's fate. Instead of using the time to rehearse, Landry held court near the catering tent with some of the younger crew members. His voice carried across the desert quiet. "Working with Duke is like working in a museum," Landry said, laughing. "Everything's about preserving the past. No creativity. No evolution. Just hit your mark, say your line, collect your paycheck. This is why American cinema is stuck in the 1940s while Europe is making art that actually matters. He went on. And on. About how method acting had revolutionized performance. About how Duke represented everything outdated about Hollywood. About how real actors didn't need scripts, they needed emotional truth. What Landry didn't know, 3 things. First, one of those young crew members was Duke's godson. Second, Duke's longtime script supervisor was standing behind a nearby equipment truck, hearing every word. Third, the dying American cinema Landry was mocking had made Duke Wayne the most beloved movie star on earth. Within 10 minutes, 5 different crew members had quietly found Duke in his trailer. They didn't want to cause trouble. But they thought he should know what was being said about him. Duke listened to each of them. Thanked them. Then sat alone, smoking a cigarette, staring at the script pages he'd written. The pages this kid couldn't be bothered to learn. After lunch, they reset for the scene. The crew was silent. Tense. Everyone sensed something big was about to happen. Duke called action. Landry made it through exactly 3 lines before stopping. "I'm sorry, Duke. I just can't make this dialogue work. It's not how human beings actually communicate. Maybe if we improvised, found something more organic." Duke stood up from his mark. The entire desert seemed to go quiet. Duke didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. When you've commanded the screen for 40 years, you learn that quiet authority speaks louder than any shout. "You spent lunch," Duke said slowly, each word deliberate, "telling the crew that I'm a museum piece. That American cinema is dying because of people like me. That scripts don't matter. That discipline is the enemy of art." Landry's face went pale. "I didn't, that wasn't." "Did you?" Duke interrupted, voice still quiet but carrying across the entire set, "learn your lines." Landry's mouth opened. Closed. "I know the general intention of the scene." "That's a no," Duke said. The 85 crew members stood frozen, watching. This was unprecedented. Duke never called out actors publicly. Never embarrassed anyone in front of the crew. But something had shifted. A line had been crossed. "Let me tell you about this dying American cinema," Duke continued, his voice carrying that same controlled intensity that had held audiences captive for 4 decades. "That cameraman over there? He's been on set since 3 a.m. making sure the light's perfect for your close-up. That woman doing makeup? She's worked on 60 of my pictures, and she's never once made anyone wait while she got creative. That horse wrangler? He spent 2 hours this morning calming the animals after last night's storm. And me? I've been here since before sunrise, knowing every word of a scene I wrote, because that's what professionals do." Landry tried to speak. "Duke, I apologize if..." "You've had 4 days," Duke cut him off. 4 days to show up on time. 4 days to learn your lines. 4 days to treat these people, these professionals, with basic respect. Instead, you've been late every morning, unprepared every scene, and spent your lunch break insulting the work that's fed these families for decades. "I can do better," Landry said, and for the first time, genuine fear cracked through his arrogance. "Give me one more chance. Tomorrow, I'll..." "Pack your bags," Duke said. 4 beats of silence. Absolute. Complete. "What?" Landry whispered. "Pack your bags," Duke repeated, and though his voice never rose above conversational volume, every person on that desert set heard it clearly. "You're done." "You can't. The studio, my contract." "The studio hired a professional actor," Duke said. "That's not you. Pack your bags." Duke turned his back on Landry and walked to the assistant director. "Call Jimmy Stewart's nephew, the kid we screen tested last month. See how fast he can get here. We'll shoot around this scene until then." Then Duke addressed the entire crew, 85 people standing in stunned silence. "Let's not waste the day, folks. We're moving to scene 31. Let's make something we're proud of." Michael Landry stood alone in the middle of the Sonoran Desert, surrounded by 85 people who wouldn't look at him. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked around desperately for someone, anyone, to defend him, to tell Duke he was overreacting, to explain that artists need special consideration. Nobody spoke. These were crew members who'd been up since before dawn, who'd set up equipment in 104-degree heat, who'd waited patiently while Landry drank tea and talked about his process. They had zero sympathy left. "This is a mistake," Landry finally said, his voice shaking. "I'm the best actor you'll ever work with. When this film fails without me, you'll realize." Nobody responded. Duke had already walked away, studying the next scene's setup with his cinematographer. Landry stood there for another 30 seconds, perhaps waiting for Duke to change his mind, for someone to intervene, for reality to bend back to what he expected. It didn't. Finally, Landry turned and walked toward his trailer. His footsteps crunched in the desert gravel. Somewhere, a crew member's radio crackled. Otherwise, silence. 20 minutes later, a production van pulled up to Landry's trailer. He emerged with 2 suitcases and a hanging bag, his designer sunglasses hiding whatever was happening in his eyes. He climbed into the van without speaking to anyone. As the van drove away, kicking up dust on the desert road, Duke never looked up from the shot list he was reviewing with his assistant director. The crew watched the van disappear toward the highway. Then someone said, "All right, folks, we've got work to do." And like a machine that had briefly paused, the production roared back to life. Within an hour, they were shooting. The energy on set was different now. Focused. Grateful. Everyone worked a little harder, a little sharper, understanding they'd just witnessed something rare: accountability. That evening, the story started spreading. And what happened to Michael Landry's career became a cautionary tale that's still told in acting classes today. Stay with me, the ending might surprise you. And if this story is teaching you something, hit that subscribe button and drop your country in the comments. Let's see how global this lesson goes. The story reached Los Angeles before Landry's van did. Duke Wayne Fired the New York Kid became the talk of every studio lot by sunset. Landry's agent tried spinning it as creative differences, but 5 crew members had already called their friends in other productions. The truth was out. Landry had been late, unprepared, and arrogant. He'd insulted Duke and disrespected working people. Duke had given him 4 chances. Then 5 words ended it all. Within a week, Landry lost 2 upcoming roles. Within a month, his agent stopped returning calls. Within 6 months, he'd moved back to New York. But here's the part that breaks your heart: Landry never acted again. Not in film. Not on stage. Not anywhere. The weight of what he'd lost, and how easily he'd thrown it away, broke something inside him that never healed. Meanwhile, the young actor Duke hired to replace Landry showed up 2 days later, knew every line perfectly, and delivered a performance that critics praised when the film released. The movie was a success. Duke's legacy grew even larger. Years later, a film student asked Duke about the incident. His answer was pure Duke: talent is common. Character is rare. I've worked with hundreds of talented people. But the ones who lasted? They were the ones who showed up on time, learned their lines, and treated every person on set like they mattered. That's not old Hollywood. That's basic human decency. To this day, "pack your bags" remains Hollywood shorthand for an actor fired for unprofessionalism. And young actors arriving on their first professional set learn the story of Michael Landry, the man who had everything and lost it all because he confused confidence with arrogance. The lesson is simple, but it's everything. Your talent might open the door. But your character determines whether you get to stay in the room. Respect isn't about kissing up to powerful people. It's about honoring the effort of every person contributing to something larger than themselves. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that success requires both skill and humility, do me a favor: subscribe to this channel, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what lesson you're taking away. Because Duke was right. American cinema didn't die. But careers built on arrogance? Those die every single day. And that's a truth that never goes out of style.